So there was an opportunity that came up. There was an American collection that included works from ancient Colombia. It was very unique. There aren't that many collections in the world focused on those cultures. And so we took that occasion to bring those objects into our collection, but then needed to understand how to tell those stories in a new way. So one of the things I did was sought advice from Diana Magaloni, who was then director of the Anthropological Museum in Mexico City, who had a background in conservation, who was thinking about ancient and indigenous American cultures, and eventually was able to convince her to move to Los Angeles to help lead this program.
The quality of those ceramics, the art behind them, were just stunning and amazing. LACMA had a very important and spectacular pre-Columbian ceramic collection that we needed to investigate. We had a young scholar, Julia Burtenshaw, with really a talent to see and to put things together and think differently.
And now we're going to do a big exhibition with these objects here at LACMA, which will probably be one of the biggest exhibitions of ancient Colombia that's ever been in the United States. I studied archaeology and anthropology at Cambridge University. I decided to focus my PhD on museum objects because I was working at a museum in Switzerland, and there are so many pieces in those collections. There are so many pieces in storage that nobody knows anything about. And rather than excavate more pieces, I decided that I wanted to study the ones that were already in collections.
How to create a narrative, a story, how to create a feeling, how to create a moment of, it's so difficult in exhibition. So wow, this is our gallery, Julia.
It's big.
It's a challenge.
It's certainly the largest show I've ever worked on.
We didn't know how to start.
There's not that much known about ancient Colombia.
For the better part of the last century, Colombia was in a state of war. It was dangerous for the people who lived in the war zones, and also archaeological digs in the countryside were extremely risky. So the scholarship on indigenous materials was hampered. Not much could be done to do research on the context of indigenous materials, of indigenous ancient works.
In 2016, we invited some colleagues from the Museo del Oro, or Gold Museum in Bogotá, who are our partners in this exhibition project, to look at our collection. And they came and pretty quickly pointed out a number of fakes. And of course, that was something that worried us, because we really didn't have a lot of expertise in studying these Colombian ceramics. And so it was a big concern whether our collection was actually suitable to do a major exhibition like this.
My heart sank into my stomach, and I couldn't believe that here we are with this amazing collection, and we really didn't know how to gauge if they were even real. They were thinking that the baby was added?
Yeah, they just said it's just very convenient, these figures with babies. The incisions were too clean and too crisp on a lot of them. I remember that being a problem.
Most of the pieces come as gifts, not as archaeological digs. Many of them were taken by looters from their sites and just brought into the art market.
As a museum, we have a responsibility to present accurate information to our audiences. This whole surface looks weird, like this here.
We need to see comparable ceramics in Colombia. That is why we found the support to go to Colombia in a research trip to train ourselves to vet the collection. And we really didn't know that this was going to change our perspective on life and our perspective of our own mission at LACMA.
Our first destination was the Gold Museum in Bogotá, who are our partners in this. They're the ones who raised some red flags about pieces in our collection. And so we really wanted to go and work with them and benefit from their expertise to get a better understanding of what we were working with.
Soy María Alicia Uribe, directora del Museo del Oro del Banco de la República en Bogotá, Colombia.
No me gusta, esa pieza no me gusta. Y las piernas también como muy pesadas, muy grandes.
Muy gordas,
¿cierto?
proporcional lo que les otros. Sí, son muy
Sí.
We sent hundreds of images of pieces in our collection to María Alicia and her team, and they in turn pulled out dozens of objects from their collection to compare to ours, right? So that when we were there, we were looking at the photos from LACMA, we were looking at the pieces that they had pulled out of storage for us to examine, in real, so that we could compare them and really look at details. And we talked about the paints and the pastes. We looked at X-rays, where you could see how looters had compiled a piece from multiple pieces and kind of glued them together to then sell as a whole, probably for more money.
Incluso a veces pueden cubrir las piezas como con unas capas encima que llevan color, como para ocultar que la pieza estuvo fragmentada o las uniones que hicieron antes de hacer esto. Se hizo la radiografía y en la radiografía pues ya se evidenció la unión de las dos partes debajo del resane que tenía la figura antes de la limpieza y cómo brillaban las pastas diferentes tanto del cuerpo como de la cabeza. Entonces ya esto ayudó a determinar que realmente eran dos pastas distintas y se decidió pues separarlo y dejar las dos piezas aparte. Son dos piezas incompletas.
We learned a lot that week, and a lot of it made complete sense, but it was increasingly clear that you needed a lot of expertise and experience to be able to spot fakes.
Claro, es súper evidente.
¿Cierto?
Sí, no. Eso es real. Las cosas que dudamos nosotros en nuestra colección nunca son evidentes así. O sea,
I studied art conservation in Mexico City. The school really emphasized that conservators were researchers, that we did research through the materiality of the objects. They really taught me that the way things are made really reflect who made them and the society in that moment. And in this context, of course, archaeology is very important.
Como decía ahorita María Alicia, que eso hace que la colección realmente tome un giro hacia la arqueología de contexto.
Y pues a mí me pasó durante la disertación doctoral.
Con Santiago fue un trabajo súper bonito porque él llegaba de su disertación, de su trabajo doctoral, de una excavación en que tenía solamente fragmentos. Y fue una maravilla entre los dos trabajar.
Fue buenísimo, que se vuelve una relación pues realmente productiva.
Santiago, as an archaeologist, has been collaborating with Museo del Oro for a long time. He excavates pieces and he brings them to them so they can compare the pieces that Museo del Oro has collected without archaeological context and the ones that he excavates with archaeological context. That is the way to create knowledge, and we were so excited to be part of this collaboration.
With Santiago and his expertise at our fingertips, we decided to visit an archaeological site that he's been working at, which is Ciudad Perdida, or the Lost City. That is one of the most famous and spectacular sites of Colombia. It's sometimes called the Machu Picchu of ancient Colombia, but it's far more remote and much, much harder to access.
If there's a foreign president visiting Colombia, that's usually where he gets taken to. From a political, heritage, and research standpoint, it's hugely important.
It was the home of the ancient Tairona people, and some of the most spectacular objects in our collection are from the Tairona. This is a small selection of the Tairona pieces that we have in the collection.
Archaeological information is immensely important for us to reconstruct the history of these objects.
Here, this was part of an archaeological excavation, and they found this. So this was one of the clues for understanding that there's a number of buried structures below many of these terraces. So this is an excavation trench that was left open to the public.
I mean, I do want to ask about burials at this site. at some
Sure.
point, because
So
that's something that-
one of the interesting aspects about burials that we've been discussing on and off with a number of colleagues is that usually you'll find a single burial inside the ring.
A single?
Usually a single burial.
burial.
It's a single burial, and it looks like it's an ancestor burial.
Okay.
So it's like great-great-great-great-great-great-grandpa's tomb. And so usually what you'll find are the grave goods. And that's what the looters were after because a lot of the grave goods had gold.
Are we going to the north?
Yeah, we're going
Neighborhood?
Yep.
Was it dangerous to come up during the war?
At that time, yeah, well, when I began working here, yeah, the whole lower part of the basin was controlled by paramilitaries.
Footsies.
So, but it was work and
It was work.
it was work.
Well, you were brave, eh?
Or very stupid.
When this site was rediscovered by the West in the 1970s, Colombia was already in a state of armed conflict for a couple of decades. So, you know, the slopes of this mountain were fought over by various groups in a very bloody conflict. And so conducting archaeological excavations in some of these remote places was incredibly dangerous. The Tairona lived in this region between about 900 and 1600 AD. And so they, you know, carved into this mountainside, you know, these terraces and platforms, and on them would have been, you know, houses made of wood and palm fronds and mud and stones, you know, and it would have been the center of a very vibrant, thriving community, a very busy place.
It's so amazing. There are paths everywhere. Look, everything is connected with everything. And Santiago, you found all of these stones like in this place, and it is only like a bit of reconstruction, or how do you work
quite a
this?
bit of restoration. It was found by the looters, and it was looted for about 2 years, from 72 to around 75. And so it was looted on and off by this family of looters. Then other looters that were working here on the mountain got wind of the site because there was quite a bit of gold coming out of this place. We know that it was coming out of this place. And so the other looters followed the original group of looters up here. They got into a shotgun fight, and the son of one of the looters was killed.
Wow.
And he ended up being buried up here at Ciudad Perdida for a couple of years. And then the patron of the looters called the Gold Museum and said, hey, you know, I've got this spectacular site. Do you want to loot it with me? And the Gold Museum was like, well, it doesn't really work that way. Many people used to buy up looted items specifically because they thought that they were going to leave the country. It wasn't because they wanted to buy looted items, it was actually to stop them from leaving the country. So there is a high sense of pride, an elevated sense of pride related to many of these objects.
Being at Ciudad Perdida is one of the most amazing experiences of my life, really. The expansion. If you want to understand the objects, you cannot look at them by themselves. You need to connect them to the places they are from. You need to connect them to the landscapes.
This would have been a vibrant, well-populated cultural landscape, just absolutely full of people, merchants plying their trade, moving back and forth, moving salt fish from the coast all the way up here, cotton being grown in the lowlands.
You know, from visiting this place, we learned so much about how we have to understand these ancient pieces. We've seen the kind of city context where they would have come from, the landscape. We've talked to colleagues. We have looked at comparable pieces in other collections. But what's still missing is to speak with descendant communities.
can we meet the descendant of the Tairona? Where can we look for them? How can we start a dialogue? And I realized that I had just not understood my place. I really needed to start listening and to change completely my attitude.